Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I normally make videos about reading, what I'm reading, writing, etc. And I've been diving into some topics related to that. And this is a topic video, but it's quite loosely related to this. It's more of a psychology video. And it's just because this is what I want to make. And this is just what I've been thinking about all day and kind of for the past few weeks. Let's just get into it, shall we? And just have a bit of a loose discussion because I think this topic is super interesting and it will probably resonate with a lot of people, including people really interested in improving their reading at a higher level, and their writing as well. So, I studied psychology at university. I've got a psychology degree and I'm super interested in it. I always wanted to go into clinical psychology and become a clinical psychologist. However, I ended up going down a slightly different path and doing a master's in animal behaviour. And now I work as a behaviour consultant, which is basically like a clinical psychologist but for animals. You kind of assess animals' emotional problems, their difficulties, and address it with kind of a comprehensive plan with their caregivers. That might involve some training, but also environmental management changes. And it's all very science and evidence based. However, recently, through a turn of events I won't get into, currently I have a certification as a behavior consultant, but I'm wanting to go a bit higher and get my clinical animal behaviorist certification because that's just a bit more thorough, a little bit more comprehensive. And to do that, I've been having to map all of my past learning from my undergrad and my master's degrees against kind of learning objectives, and I'm missing some of those, which is a shame, which means I'm probably going to need to pursue some further academic study just to fill some of those gaps in the clinical animal behaviour topics. Trouble is, I've been out of formal university education for about 10 years, so recalling everything I've done and looking at the transcripts has been really quite challenging. The transcripts are not in a lot of detail. It just basically says the title of the module, and then I have to remember what actually happened in that module. And it's scary how much I don't remember. I was messaging my friend to be like, "Did you take leadership in psychology?" And what was that? What actually did we cover in that topic? Was it social psychology? Was it organizational psychology? Who knows? I can't remember at all. And this has sent me into a bit of a spiral of trying to recall as much information from my degrees as possible and thinking what even was the point to doing all of this if I was just going to forget it all so entirely. So I've been looking through my emails to find kind of old copies of my essays and stuff that I did while I was at uni, just to try and shed more light on what I was doing. I've changed laptops several times, so all of that work is pretty much gone. My undergrad thesis is gone. Most of my impressive essays are gone. But I did today manage to find quite a few bits and pieces and ended up reading them. Now, I studied sociology and philosophy and music, kind of history of music, philosophy of music style stuff. So I was about 18, 19, 20 during these studies, and I was reading over these old assignments, the essay questions, and the answers that I provided, and I was just blown away by them, honestly. I was like, if you asked me these questions now, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. They were all so advanced and so technical. I feel like I've completely forgotten all of that knowledge. And reading these essay answers in my own voice to these questions, formulated in such a academic and intelligent way, I was really impressed by my 18-year-old self. Not in a narcissistic bigging myself up way, but if I read those and you didn't tell me that they were me, I wouldn't have been able to guess. They just felt so far removed from me today and where I feel like my skills are today, that it sort of made me feel a bit sad because I clearly was quite a good student and clearly was quite good at academic writing and critical thinking. I had quite a lot of my own thoughts and opinions in there, and they were all quite valid. They were all following really logical arguments and following the scientific process, the evidence based process. And I don't know what I expected. I just think I've developed so much as a person since then in so many other ways that I would think reading them back as like a 32-year-old, I would go, oh, these aren't very good, poor little 19-year-old me. But I didn't feel that way at all. I felt like they were really good and, in fact, better than what I would produce today under the same kind of circumstances, which is a bit of a concern. And it kind of shoved me down this rabbit hole of looking into like skill regression because I feel like there's a lot of academic skill regression in comparing like me today to me at uni. I even recently looked at my more professional, like behavioral case studies that I submitted for receiving my certification. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago that I did it. And I've not written as many case studies since then because I'm kind of just doing the job now. And when I'm writing reports, I'm not writing them in an academic way, I'm kind of writing them for the layperson, so it's a very different kind of writing. And reading these like case studies, I was even impressed, like, oh, these are much better than I remember them being. That was quite nice because I was like, oh, maybe I do deserve to be here, maybe I do have the skills. And I've just lost that, and I feel a bit more like I'm losing some confidence in myself and my ability. I think the good thing about reviewing old work and seeing that it actually is good and there actually is quality is like, that is me. I did do that, so maybe I can get back there again, even if I'm a bit out of practice at the moment. But at the same time, I do feel quite daunted about the idea of going back to like doing a university course or even doing some like master's modules for top up after 10 plus years break from academia and from doing academic writing, and having to like resubmit case studies and things like that as well, but to a much higher standard. I feel a bit daunted by the fact that my skills now might not be where they were 5 or 10 years ago. And if I'd just gone on to those areas of study and gone on to those applications back then, I might have done a better job than I would now, even though I didn't have the practical skills to do that job back then, and I do now because I've kind of been focusing on building all my practical, real life world experience in the past 5 to 10 years. And that's really valuable too. But like, how can we have both? How can I get my old academic writing and critical thinking skills back to where they were in the good old days of uni? And why do I feel like I've regressed so much? So I sort of looked into it. I did some Googling about skill regression, and mostly what comes up when we talk about skill regression is people with autism and ADHD and how they experience skill regression. This is something that commonly happens with autism and ADHD. When someone receives their diagnosis in adulthood, all of those skills they were using to kind of live their life normally and mask those symptoms, suddenly they realize they actually have this diagnosis, and that explains a lot of their experiences and behavior. They can kind of stop being able to mask, and they can experience some skill regression in those kind of masking skills that they were using to get by, because they realize, oh, I am actually not normal and I don't need to do all of this. So they stop doing it. It's also very common in autistic and ADHD people and other people when they have burnout, like specifically autism, ADHD, neurodiversity burnout. It can cause a skill regression, not in this academic sense I was just talking about, but it's more in like dressing yourself, doing the household chores, cooking for yourself, things like that. These adulting kind of coping skills that people develop can fall by the wayside when they are in a depressive episode or they're in neurodivergent burnout, which is really interesting because I do feel like I have been feeling quite burnt out on and off for quite a while, and perhaps that's why I'm feeling this bit of regression. But this academic skill regression isn't quite the same thing, and I don't have a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, so we have to park that not as an explanation, but non that neurodiverse people can experience burnout as well. And if you're burned out, yeah, you're probably going to struggle with like school and academics and work and things like that. So I think that could be a possible explanation for why some of our skills can feel like they're diminishing. I think another explanation is also just lack of practice and environment. So I've also recently started playing the piano again after not having my piano in my house for a good 9, 10 years. And I've been like relearning the pieces that I used to be able to play back then. And actually, I've been able to pick them up fairly easily, more easily than when I learned them for the first time. I even like spontaneously and like quite perfectly remembered one of these pieces that I just figured out and learned how to play without the music. But it didn't come right away, and I actually forgot that piece for many years. And it was only once I started playing other things again and things that were kind of adjacent and by the same composer, I just suddenly spontaneously remembered it all. So I think with these kind of motor skills, like playing a piano or playing a musical instrument, riding a bike, these things do come back a bit more easily and a bit more spontaneously. Sometimes once you're just in that habit of playing the piano again, your brain starts exercising those neural pathways again, and then it's like, oh, there it is. I found it. It was just lost in the library of my brain for a while. And I think that's super interesting. I think the same thing will happen for like academic writing and studying. You come out of that university environment and you don't go straight into like a PhD or a research job where you're not using those skills, you're not doing statistics, you're not writing reports. You do lose those skills, but once you find yourself back in an environment, like you go back as a mature student or you suddenly have an assignment at work that involves those skills, you will be able to pick them up more easily again, even if you have to teach yourself kind of from scratch. It's going to come back to you much quicker. And then once all of that environmental stimuli is there of you being at uni, attending the classes, easing yourself back into it, you can get back to where you were, and you probably haven't regressed in your skills as much as you think you have. There were some tips online about, reading a scientific article a day or like one a week or something like that, and kind of easing yourself back into these kind of things gradually rather than, you know, trying to do something really challenging and then struggling and then getting all disheartened. I think you could apply this to like reading and writing quite well. For example, if you've not been doing your creative writing for a while, maybe starting by like writing a novel is probably not a good start and it's going to set you up for failure, but maybe coming back with some short writing exercises and short stories would be like preferable. And with reading, say in high school, you used to read a lot of classics and plays for English class, and then you kind of fell out of reading after school and you've not read for a little while, and now you're getting back into it, but you're reading like romantasy, Colleen Hoover, thrillers, things that are a bit more commercial, a bit more just entertaining and a bit more simple in like maybe their writing style or their plot structure. And you're like, man, I used to read like Wuthering Heights. I used to read all of these historical classics that had quite complex language and complex concepts, and now I feel like I just don't have the attention span for that. Perhaps it's something we can recover. Perhaps we can ease ourselves back into reading these more challenging works by doing the audiobook or reading a few pages a day but having like a fun romantasy on the go at the same time. Because I definitely feel that way about reading. Like I used to read more challenging things at school than I do now. I even feel like at school you could write essays and really critique a work and analyze it. And doing these videos, like, is trying to get me back in that headspace of doing analysis. But I still feel like my analysis is quite shallow and I could be more academic with it. I could be more in depth. And maybe it's just like playing the piano or working out, and it's just a muscle that you have to like gradually start exercising, and over time it will get stronger and better. But it does take a lot of intentionality and sustained effort to kind of set up a program for yourself, a bit of a shaping plan, and gradually start stretching these intellectual muscles again. For those that don't know, a shaping plan is something we use in animal training. It's where you break down the behavior into like small steps. So for a person that's maybe wanting to go to the gym, you wouldn't start with an hour workout. You would maybe start with like a 5 minute walk. And you might even start by just laying out your gym clothes so that they are ready for you for the next day. It's small steps and kind of rewarding the small steps rather than going in at full intensity and just instantly getting disheartened and burning out. So we should do this for ourselves. We should have little shaping plans to get us back on track if we want to. You don't have to, but I do think there's some value and merit to it. Now, let's talk about some other reasons why we might be feeling like there's a skill regression. There is a small possibility, especially if you're older, that you could be experiencing dementia or something like that. That can cause like a very real skill regression. You might experience like real cognitive decline. That could even be associated with like alcohol use, drug use, and things like this. Unless that's you, you probably don't need to worry about that unless you're of an age where you want to be thinking about getting your brain checked out. You see it with older people with like driving, they know how to drive their whole life, but once they hit a certain age, they start to make mistakes, have accidents, maybe get confused and get lost. It is something with older relatives we have to be mindful of, and it's possible they might lose their license if they go to their doctor and their doctor discovers there is some cognitive decline in that area. So that's a very real skill regression that has a medical explanation and is something to worry about if you're in that at risk group. Other things that can cause skill regression besides autism and besides normal out of practice skill regression is actually trauma as well. So I recently did a course on trauma in animals and it was really interesting. I have a bit of a case at the moment who I would hypothesize has been through some trauma, and he frequently experiences some skill regression because of his fears and because he has to have some vet treatment. The vet treatment kind of sets him back. But interestingly, he had a treatment. I was doing a lot of kind of needle phobia work with him, and that needle work didn't regress a whole lot, but his catching actually regressed quite a lot, which was quite basic and something that he hadn't really struggled with in like a long time. And this course, which was hosted by a neuroscientist, was saying that trauma can sometimes cause regression in like unrelated areas, especially when there was kind of this re-stressing and this re-upsetting of the system. And I thought that was interesting. I wonder if it applies to humans, but I've definitely seen that with animals. And when things go a bit wrong and they get a bit stressed, it doesn't always have the effect that you think it's going to have. You'd think if someone had a bad injection, their injection would regress, but instead, something else completely random regresses. And their mind almost latches on to other things in the environment that were there at the time and sort of pins the negativity onto that, and then you have to work on that, which is very complicated when you're trying to help that animal through training. But I digress. I think this shows that trauma can cause some regression, the same way that burnout can cause you to regress just because you're not coping with stress so well. And when you're not coping with stress, it has quite a big fallout in other areas of your life. And then finally, to end on a positive, another reason why we might think that we're regressing, but we're not, is the Kruger-Dunning effect. So the Kruger-Dunning effect is something that everyone has. It's a cognitive bias. And basically what it means is that people that aren't very experienced and don't have a lot of knowledge, they tend to overestimate their abilities and their skills. So someone, say, that is a very beginner level animal trainer might think that they are a behavioural expert. They might think that they're the best trainer to ever live because they've always had success with the limited number of cases that they've had. And they know some of the basic psychology and they've got some experience. But someone that's been doing the job 20 years, they now have an awareness of how big and how complex the topic is, and they start to underestimate their ability, even though they might have 20 or 30 years experience. They might have a PhD, they might have all of their like clinical animal behavior certifications, and they're probably going to doubt themselves more than someone that's an amateur because they're just aware of everything that they don't know and all of the ways in which they're not an expert, and they've like got enough experience to know that like the career's always surprising and they're always finding things that make them go, this is interesting. I don't actually know what to do here. I don't have all of the answers. Because all of those common, easy answers that might work 90% of the time, once you see enough cases, you're going to come across cases that that doesn't work for. Kind of like the case I was just talking about, who struggles with his anxiety. So I think this is also at play with me and how I've been feeling lately of I've been through the amateur phase. I'm gaining quite a lot of knowledge and experience and coming across challenges, and then I'm going, oh god, like am I even worthy of being here? Like, should I even be doing this? There's so much I don't know. Like, I don't have all the answers. But there are lots of people who don't have the education and the experience that I have that are out there confidently doing the wrong thing. And the good thing about the Kruger-Dunning effect is as long as you don't let it discourage you, you just keep learning, you keep getting experience. Eventually, this kind of bell curve of confidence, you work through that low period and you'll end up coming out being like, you know what? I am an expert and I do trust my knowledge and I do trust my experience and my ability to handle kind of whatever's thrown at me. And maybe when I was at uni and I was writing these really good essays that I was impressed to read today, maybe they weren't even as good as I think they were. And maybe when I was at uni and I was writing all of these papers and essays that I'm reading today and going, they were really good. And at the time, I probably thought, this is the best that I can do. Maybe they're not even as good as current and past me thought they were, because I'm actually an amateur at that, particularly with like philosophy and music and sociology. So maybe this is just all the Kruger Dunning effect, and I'm actually fine, and I don't need to be too down on myself, and maybe not be too impressed by my younger self. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you feel like you've had skill regression since leaving uni, if you went to uni, or in any other areas of your life? Is this relatable, or am I like overthinking things? And are there any old skills that you used to have that you think you might want to try and like bring back and improve again? Because I definitely think, having read all of these essays from my younger self, I would like to get back to that level of skill and that level of academic writing and critical thinking. I don't like feeling like I'm becoming less intelligent or less skilled or less articulate. I also think just being on my phone and being on TikTok and Instagram and just chronically online too much is possibly contributing to me dumbing myself down and engaging in less critical thinking and having a poorer attention span and things like that. So I think I need to do more to like counteract some of the negative effects of these things while still having it as a fun hobby on the side. Yeah, I think that's what I need to do. And maybe read more academic papers and like critically evaluate them. And that's what I'm going to need to do to get this like higher level of certification that I'm going for. It's all about demonstrating university level knowledge and critically engaging with the topics, not just regurgitating knowledge. So this is something I do need to upskill or re-skill, I guess. And it's going to be a bit of a mission for me and also very expensive. So wish me luck. Thanks for watching this random weird rant. I will get back to normal bookish content next week. But if you like this and you like these kind of psychology topics, let me know and maybe I'll do some more, because I do really enjoy talking about this stuff. And it is kind of a good way for me to get back into thinking about the academic study of psychology and coming up with my own theories based on research that I've read. Right. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!